everyone, this is Rod from The Alchemist, then the Esoteric and Hermetic Study Society. And finally, today we'll be talking about Giordano Bruno. Giordano Bruno is really an immense figure. He's really a man of the Italian Renaissance. He's a poet, he's a writer, he's a naturalist, he's a philosopher, and he is also a magician. So he's a Renaissance magician. So, of course, Hermetic, Neoplatonism. So what I would like to do today is to focus on Giordano Bruno magic. And of course, we will have to start to talk about his philosophy first in order to understand his magic, his approach to magic. Just a little bit of introduction. I think everybody knows Giordano Bruno was burned at the stake after a seven-year trial by the Inquisition. I think it was one of the longest, if not the longest, trial of the Inquisition. And actually the church was scared of this man. This man really shook the foundation of the Catholic Church. He shook the foundation of the Aristotelian teaching that they were actually standardized throughout the university in Europe during that time. And so basically, after 7 years of trial, he was burned at stake in Rome, 17th of February of the 1600. As a martyr, then, of his own thoughts, Giordano Bruno quickly became a symbol of freedom of speech, freedom of faith, tolerance, and is still today considered one of the major figures even in Freemasonry, where these values are embraced. So before moving forward, I think it's important to understand the historical context where Giordano Bruno lived. We're talking about Italy in the mid of 1500 to the 1600. Not only, of course, the situation in Italy, but the situation in Europe is a situation of big changes. The church is extremely edgy because of the division that we have with the Protestantism. We have the Calvinists, we have the Lutherans, we have the Council of Trent, which actually happened in 1563. So the church is really edgy. It's losing grips in Europe, and at the same time there are great thinkers, great scientists coming up with theories. And this is exactly the same period where Copernicus came out with his theories, with his heliocentric theories, and is also the same period where Galileo came out with his calculation and his theories. Both of them, both Copernicus and Galileo, they were actually tried by the church and asked to retract their theories, in which they did. In fact, Copernicus did not continue to present his studies. He stopped it there, and he never actually published his De Revolutionibus during his lifetime. This book was actually published after his death. So both Copernicus and Galileo came across something big, came across about the heliocentric theories, which were, again, shaking the whole foundation of the Ptolemaic Aristotelian system. But the church was able to ask them to retract. Actually, Galileo Galilei was actually put in home arrest, where he stayed until the end of his life. And on the other hand, we have Giordano Bruno, who at the age of 17 entered the Dominican order, entered a monastery in the Dominican order, which was the only way at the time to get some kind of education. So if you wanted to learn how to read and write Latin, Italian, and other languages, the only way was actually to join a monastery. And he stayed there for like 7 years, if I'm not wrong. And it seems that during the years in the Dominican order, he also had the chance to meet Giovan Battista della Porta, which is another very famous naturalist and magician in the Italian history. Della Porta is following the teaching of Albertus Magnus, and it's said that most likely Bruno had the chance to meet with Giambattista della Porta, where he also started to get some information about natural magic. So after a while, Giordano Bruno realized actually the Dominican order was a little bit too tight for him and decided to leave. And then where the amazing story of this man began, because from a man out of nowhere, he was out of Nola, which is in the province of Naples today. He quickly became a friend with most of the kings and queens in Europe and invited. He met Queen Elizabeth. Um, Also, story has it that he met with Rosicrucian in Germany. So for this guy to become such a known person, he had the chance to teach at the major university, at the Sorbonne, at Oxford. So it was pretty an amazing career and an amazing life that Giordano Bruno had out of pretty much out of nowhere. But again, we're not gonna get into the details of his life. I think the life is very well explained in many other videos and many other books available. What we would like to focus is his philosophy and magic. So starting from his philosophy, Giordano Bruno has a very strong influence from Islamic astrology, especially the writing of Averroes. He is deeply influenced by the Corpus Hermeticum from the Hermetics writings, and also very strong influence by Neoplatonism, Platonism and Neoplatonism, to the point that actually he refused the Aristotelian teaching, the standard teaching.
There is no absolute up or down, as Aristotle taught, no absolute position in space, but the position of a body is relative to that of other bodies. Everywhere there is incessant relative change in position throughout the universe, and the observer is always at the center of things.
For him, ideas and materiality are exactly the same thing. So this is contrary to Plato's theory of the ideas, where we have the ideas which are like transcendental idea, and then we have the material world, and the two things are different. For Bruno, both the ideas and the material world are exactly the same thing. Another key point of his philosophy was, well, Bruno was a panentheist, so thinking, of course, that God is greater than everything, God transcends everything. But he was also pantheist, saying that God is, yes, God is transcendent, is above everything, but at the very same time is also inside of everything. So his two famous sentences were like mens super omnia. So the mens, in the way that Neoplatonic intends the mens, the nous, the God, is transcendent, is behind and beyond everything, but is also mens insita omnibus, is also inside everything. So the two things are exactly the same. So with our brain, with our midbrain, we cannot definitely get to know, we cannot wrap our brain around the mens, the God, in his transcendent form. But in order to know God, we can study nature, because that's where God is. So our midbrain has the possibility to know God by studying, knowing, and loving what we have in this material world. So for Bruno, essentially, nature is divine. And here is also where he introduced his concept of infinity. Infinity both applied to universe and applied to God, which for him are exactly the same thing.
God is infinite, so his universe must be too. Thus is the excellence of God magnified and the greatness of his kingdom made manifest. He is glorified not in one, but in countless suns, not in a single earth, a single world, but in 1,000,000, I say in an infinity of worlds.
So what he's saying is God as a cause is infinite. So God being a cause and being infinite produce effects that are also infinite. So God, nature, universe, infinite, are exactly the same thing. He then recovers the philosophy of Nicholas of Cusa, where Nicholas of Cusa was promoting the idea of the coincidentia oppositorum, the coincidence of the opposites, because in an infinite universe, there are no opposites, but the opposites are coincidental. So Nicholas of Cusa, with the coincidence oppositorum, of course, is also recalling Heraclitus in this thought, and Bruno take this as part of his own thought and is part of his own philosophy. And moreover, as we said at the beginning, that both Copernicus and Galilei retracted their theories. Well, at the same time where Copernicus retracted, Bruno took over, and Bruno became more Copernican than Copernicus, because not only he was propagating the idea, was promoting the idea of Copernicus that actually is not the Earth at the center of everything. We are not the center of everything, but is the sun actually, is actually Earth that revolves around the sun. So not only he was promoting Copernicus' idea, but even went over, saying that not only the sun is the center of our system, but there are infinite, and here we take again the concept of infinite. There are infinite suns in this infinite universe, and there is an infinite number of worlds revolving around these infinite suns. So he really became more Copernican than Copernicus, and he started promoting this idea all over the European university where he had the chance to teach, so in France, in England, and Germany.
There is in the universe neither center nor circumference.
And then finally we move into Giordano Bruno, the Renaissance magician. And I think pretty much everybody's familiar with the art of memory. Is in his the Umbra Idearum, the shadow of the ideas, where he's promoting mnemonic techniques. But the mnemonic techniques that Bruno is talking about, they are very imbued with occult teaching. I mean, the art of memory actually traces back really long ago, and is known that Cicero used this method. Is a traditional method. It's a different way to use our memories. It's something that just connects. It's something that uses actually the amygdala and the hippocampus in order to shoot this information directly into our long-term memory, instead of going through repetition, so going through a cognitive process and then repetition in order to digest the information. These techniques are made in order to bypass that level and go directly into the long-term memory. But the interesting part is that is why actually Bruno got interested into the art of memory. And this is where starts his occult path, because according to Bruno, the more information we can memorize, the more we're able to make connection, and the more our mind is able to expand and get to know more things. So he really wanted to create like a huge database. So the bigger is the database, according to Bruno, the bigger actually is the chance that our mind can actually expand. So he really wanted to create a structure in order to improve the intelligence, and therefore be able to comprehend more. So of course we're not going into the details of the art of memory, which would be impossible to summarize even in a short video. But just to give some idea what is about, essentially, well, Bruno not only used the techniques from the Lullian wheel, where you can store the information, but Bruno actually started to use painting to store information, and put these loci, these places where information are stored, should be actually linked to something emotional. In fact, I think everybody would remember the date of the birth of their own child, or some specific emotional event in our life. There are dates that get imprinted into us, into our mind, and we are hardly ever forget those. So if we're able to associate visual image with an emotion, and putting on the top this information really, as I mentioned before, will shoot through the hippocampus and go directly into the long-term memory. This is just a very brief summary on how these techniques actually worked. That's something I think Bruno bumped into while he was studying the art of memory. And this something that actually is much more than just shooting information into our long-term memory, is the fact that through what we call sigils, the information may work in two ways. So one way is for us to receive it, but through a proper sigil, actually we're also able to receive information. So the sigil is also something that allows us to understand. And the sigil of Giordano Bruno, the sigil that he came up with, they're really much resembling the Asian mandalas, although Giordano Bruno seems he never had any connection with any Asian discipline or religion throughout his life. But if we compare his sigils and overlapped with Indian mandala or Buddhist mandala, actually the geometrical structure is exactly the same. So the sigil of Giordano Bruno, or what we call the loci for the memory, they are actually working in two ways. So receive the information, but these sigils are also some kind of way to access a higher level of information. I like here also we need to specify the difference between symbols and sigils. Sigils are, I mean, symbols are a language, right? Symbols is the language of the subconscious. Symbols are living structures. Symbols are doors. Symbols have doors and are doors, and that we can open, and we have many doors to open through a symbol. So a symbol is a gateway to something, is a gateway to understanding. The sigil is already the understanding. The sigil is you see, you know, you get the information. So the sigil is not a door anymore. It's already what is beyond the door. And here I would like to show you some of some of the Giordano Bruno most famous sigil, that I think a lot of studies have been done on this part, but I think hardly anybody really could get to the bottom of it. There is even the most beautiful study of Yeats, The Art of Memory, but also for her it was really hard to get to the bottom of the sigil of Giordano Bruno. So just to give you an idea, here is you see the sigil that he called the sigil of the mind, or the sigil of Apollo. Here is the sigil of the intellect, or this named the sigil of Minerva, Athena. And finally, one of the most particular one, this is the sigil of Venus, and this sigil correspond to love. So as you can see, the geometrical figures resembling very much the one of the Asian mandalas, And these geometrical figures are most likely taken from what we call the Mathesis Universalis, a little bit the older, a little bit more on the occult esoteric side of Nicholas of Cusa. So images, geometrical images that connect our reality to, as we mentioned, the matrix or the world of the ideas or what is beyond. So some geometrical figures that can actually bring the two things into one. Moreover, we also have, as I mentioned, Latin, beside this one, the work about the sigils and the work about the art of memory were already written in Latin, but there are also specific books on magic postulates. In fact, the book is called De Magia, or about magic. And here Bruno really goes all out in the traditional magic. So he really takes from Agrippa, he takes from Tritemius, he takes from Albertus Magnus for the natural magic, he takes from Pythagoras, he takes from Iamblichus, he lists the angel and demons, the direction, the time for calling. I mean, we find really a lot of grimoire tradition, natural magic, Pythagorean thoughts in his book about magic.
As the philosophers define it among philosophers, magus or magician means a wise man with the power of action.
And actually, this is the last sigil that I would like to show. And as you can see, in this sigil, around in the circle, in the center, you can see, actually, for who is familiar with it, you can see the sigil of the planets, the sigil of all the 7 planets, as reported in the Occulta Philosophia, in the book of Occult Philosophy of Agrippa. So he made this sigil, is really a representation of our system with the esoteric sigil of the planet in the middle of the sigil. And this is pretty much it for our small introduction to Giordano Bruno as a philosopher and as a magician. Again, Giordano Bruno, really an immense figure that unfortunately, especially for his occult research and for his occult theories, has been a little bit castrated. The same thing would happen with John Dee, when these geniuses, this immense figure, actually are castrated because of the dominant culture. But nevertheless, they remain, for who is actually taking time and effort to research, they remain an invaluable, endless source of inspiration. I would like to thank for this video the material from Gabriele Laporta. Gabriele Laporta was really a great philosopher, an Italian philosopher, contemporary Italian philosopher. He published several books on Giordano Bruno. He unfortunately passed away in 2019. And I also would like to mention and to thank the Giordano Bruno Society, Mr. Guido Del Giudice, who is actually currently the president of the Giordano Bruno Society, where I took, he published several books. It's 30 years researching into the life and works of Giordano Bruno. And I had the opportunity to read several of these books and watching several of the videos and material available. So that's about it. And again, thanks for staying with me today, and I hope to see you again soon. Have a nice day. Bye bye.